see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, and possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Well, thank you, Liam, my funny little alien friend. And thank you, listener and now viewer, for tuning into this episode of the Oracles with James Tyson. I really appreciate you dropping by. Thanks. And I know these videos take a while to come out because my Patreon subscribers get them first because they're subscribers and they pay the big $3 a month. So eventually they'll come out on YouTube. So deep breath, relax, you'll be able to see them. Today we have Lisa Morton. She is a self-proclaimed reformed screenwriter. Yes, she's working in the Hollywood kind of thing. She's been doing that for many, many years. She's born and raised in Southern California, born and raised in Pasadena, lives in the LA area. I love Pasadena. I was at the UFO conference there a couple of years ago before they moved to downtown LA. Big mistake. Pasadena, perfect place for it. Wonderful town, and great rose parade. There you go. Anyway, Lisa is here to talk about her latest book that came out in October. It is Calling All Spirits. It's the history of seances. It's not her only nonfiction book about the paranormal. There's quite a few of them out there. In fact, she's mixing her fiction and nonfiction. She's written 4 novels, over 150 short stories. Take that, John Steinbeck. Sorry, don't know why I said that. Anyway, get Steinbeck coming down on me. But yeah, she is a prolific writer of prose. She's a poet, nonfiction and fiction. She's won 6 Bram Stoker awards for horror writing. One of the I think it was one of the guides to reading or horror reading guides. She was. It was commented that her writing is consistently dark, unsettling, and frightening. So yeah, she's right up our alley, and what she deals with. So what we're going to talk to her about is this book, Calling All Spirits, which again came out in October. You can get it anywhere a book is sold on the Google web. Go to the Amazons, have them deliver it to your house. Go to her website, lisamorton.com. Again, lisamorton.com. Look at the myriad of books and writing she has. If you like fiction and horror and spooky stuff, you'll find it there, as well as the nonfiction stuff that you and I like to talk about. A great person and wonderful conversation. We do not get right into her book. Like, we're not going page by page. You're going to have to buy it. And we're just going to give you some teasers on it. We do talk about the Fox sisters, who kind of started the whole kind of seance culture. I shouldn't say started it. They kind of threw a monkey wrench into it after years of pulling the psychic wool over people's eyes in the US. But touch on them. We do touch on the relationship between Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Houdini, and kind of how they were both polar opposites on, one believed in spiritualism, one didn't. And by the time the relationship ended, they completely flipped around. And the whole spiritualism and psychic world is what severed their families' relationships. They were no longer friends after that. So we do touch on that. In her book, the things we don't touch on are things like Daniel Douglas Home, who was said to be the greatest medium of all time. The trial of Helen Duncan, who was tried for witchcraft back in 1944, which was said to be more popular. That trial was more popular in the newspapers than what was going on during the Second World War. So yeah, witchcraft. We talk about the scams and the shams and the bad psychics or the people basically taking your money. We touch a bit on that. So very, very interesting lady. She's going to have to come back. She's absolutely filled with knowledge. She goes out and does paranormal investigation. So she has done it. She's skeptical. Perfect. And you'll find her also on a website, not a website per se, unless, I actually haven't looked it up, Bridget. You may have a website for this, but she is on a podcast, and the podcast is escaping my head. What's going on here? It's called Ghost Magnet with Bridget Marcourt. I'm sorry, Bridget. Sorry, Lisa. I left my brain there for a sec. But Ghost Magnet with Bridget Marcourt. So Google that. Go to the Google net. Ghost Magnet, Bridget Marcourt, and you'll hear Lisa on there. She's a contributor to that podcast, and we talk a little bit about her and Bridget going out and doing paranormal investigations and what they find and the ghost magnet thing. And if you've been around paranormal investigators, you know that it's always good to have one of these people we call a ghost magnet with us, because you walk into a room and stuff happens. And without that person, you're just talking to the wall, literally. But these ghost magnets, they're great to have around. And Bridget is one. And Lisa is rather fond of that. So again, Lisa Morton, she is an author, and she's here with us. I'm going to go get her now. Lisa, how are you today?
Hey, I'm great, James. How are you?
I am fine. Just so my listener knows, this is take two. It's listener, I have viewers now. I'm just getting used to doing the video stuff here, obviously, and so I do have a listener and a viewer now on these things. Thanks very much for dropping by. I really appreciate this. I'm very, very interested in what you've been writing about, and how it's kind of opened your eyes and got you more curious into things in the paranormal, in the nonfiction side of the paranormal, because you write wonderful fiction, which sounds terrible to say. You write wonderful fiction. You make up stuff. You make up things. But the Calling the Spirits, History of Seance, that's your newest book. When did that come out?
That came out about 6 weeks ago right now.
And how's that doing?
It's doing insanely well. It just went into a second printing, which is
brilliant.
The fastest any of my nonfiction books has ever gone into a second printing. So yeah, I'm really happy about that.
Oh, it's brilliant. Plus, it's came out right at the great time for Christmas and everything too. What got you pointed in that direction? The seances versus the one of the books you had before, Ghost, the Haunted History. Now you're getting into the history of seances.
An editor did that. I had done Ghost Haunted History with a wonderful company called Reaktion Books. I also did a book called Trick or Treat: A History of Halloween with them, and I really love their books and love working with them. So when they approached me a couple of years ago and said, "What do you think about doing a history of seances?" It was like, let me think about it. Okay. It really did take about that long. And it turned out to be an incredible book to write. It was very different in my mind when I started writing it. Then by the time I reached about the halfway point, I realized, holy crap, this is almost a history of fraud. It was kind of shocking, because as I was working through the 19th century, Victorian spiritualist in particular, the amount and the methods of fraud that their mediums used, and the fact that the spiritualists continued to believe anyways, which is an amazing thing all by itself, really was like, wow, I did not expect this at all with this book.
Well, what types of fraud were you running into?
Well, it starts, of course, with the Fox sisters, who invented spiritualism and the seance when they were teenage girls in Hydesville, New York. And this is 1848 when they start. And they were in their rent. At the time, it was not even their regular house. Their main house was going to be built. They were in this rented farmhouse, and the girls started saying they heard spirits in this house. And other people started to hear these knockings around the house, and the girls soon realized that they could talk to these spirits via these wrappings. And within weeks, hundreds of people were showing up at this farmhouse 30 miles from Rochester, New York, asking to witness this. And of course, this is 1848. 40 years later, in 1888, the Fox sisters come forward and say it was all fraudulent. We did the whole thing. The spirit wrappings were us cracking our toe knuckles. They apparently had this bizarre genetic potential for being able to crack their toe knuckles so loud that people in auditoriums could hear it. So that's the first kind of big example of the fraud that came out of it, but it got much cleverer after that. Some of the things that the mediums were doing were amazing. Having special tables built, having special rooms rigged up. The wonderful musician Tom Waits has even speculated that some of the mediums may have had pipe organs installed into the walls of their rooms to create these moaning and wailing sounds. So yeah, they did amazing things.
And it was all in the, search for monetary reimbursement, I guess. They were doing this, trying to get clients to come in and pay for seances and maybe talk to their dead grandfather, that kind of thing.
That was, I'm sure, most of it. I do believe that a few of the mediums, though, were genuinely either convinced of their abilities, and perhaps there were a few who actually had some abilities, although it's hard to separate that now from the fraud. But I also believe that there were a number of them who genuinely liked the idea of offering comfort to people, that people would come into them and say, I didn't get to say goodbye to my dad, and bringing forth the spirit of their dad gave these people great solace. And I think the mediums really genuinely enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah, and that's an ego stroking thing too at times. I know certain fraudulent ways of approaching a subject when you're a medium. One of them is called a cold reading, where I would ask you, Lisa, there's a mail coming through, and this is legit. I'm gonna do this. I shouldn't say it's legit, but I'm making this up. But I want you to answer the questions truthfully. So there's a male coming through, and he's holding his chest. You have a male in your family who's passed of something in the chest?
No.
Oh, damn it. Because 70% of men who die are chest related, heart attacks or lung issues or something like that. So if you have no relatives that ever died of a heart attack that are male, good for you. But most people do. So the psychic or the medium would say, well, there's a male coming through, he's holding his chest. So it's somebody who's passed as a result of something in his chest. And they'll throw that out to an audience, like a group of people. Does this resonate with anyone here? And you get a hand coming up. Sounds like my father. Okay, it is your father. He wants you to know he's in a very good place. And you think, oh, that's great, because that's what you want to know. And by the way, you have something that belongs to him, don't you? Oh, yeah, I do. Well, we all have something that belongs to our dead fathers.
Right, of course.
Yeah, so you throw it out, got somebody who died of something in the chest, one of the hands goes up, now you're gone. You sound like you're a rock star medium, but you're making it all up.
Right, sure.
And that would be the kind of thing that, but it makes a person feel good. Especially when you say something like, oh, and you just have to know he's in a very good place.
Right.
Yeah,
my problem with some of the psychics who operate that way is that they are both very expensive, and it doesn't end with one visit. And if you can come back with $100, we can talk more to your father, or I hear your mother wants to come through, but I'm going to need special equipment. I mean, that kind of scam.
Yeah, what I've been seeing a lot. I got hit up on Facebook probably 3 weeks ago by somebody who came through and a Facebook profile of a medium who sent me a private message saying, would you like a reading? And I said, no, thank you. I'm kind of read out, but I have a very important message for you. It's like, that's like
Yeah.
like a bait and hook kind of thing.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and I looked up the person. I said, and I put a post on my Facebook. This is a scam. And this lady gets a hold of you. Then I got somebody getting back to me. He says, no, that's a real medium, but it's a fake account using that person's name.
Wow.
In fact,
Wow.
out of all the followers I had on Facebook, the real medium was following me. And I was following her, but I didn't click. There's so many. Like, I didn't click on the name. I went, oh, crap. Oh, yeah. And then I had to adjust my post. Yeah, this is a real person. No, this isn't the right profile. And we reported the profile and eventually got shut down. But it's very, very common now to send those out as we, as the population, are starting to be more comfortable with what, under the umbrella of paranormal, and being able to say it out loud. But it's fascinating to go back into it, like a seance, and at the turn of this, when these things first started, they remind me of what you see on the paranormal television now, where you get a group of people sitting in a room asking a ghost to come forward. It really comes down to, it's like a basic seance. But those ones, sitting around the table and the table tipping and all that other thing, it is fascinating. Did you touch at all on the Houdini issue with seances?
Oh, yes. Yeah. In fact, not only do I talk about Houdini and his password he shared with his wife and so forth, but the friendship between Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is, to me, one of the most interesting relationships I've ever heard about. And I cover that extensively in the book. It was fascinating that here were these two men who had a great admiration for each other. Houdini loved writers, and he was so flattered to have the creator of Sherlock Holmes writing letters to him that he had a special little custom velvet-lined box made that he kept Conan Doyle's letters in. He had an amazing library at his home, and in return, Conan Doyle, of course, was very interested in Houdini, the great magician. And it was interesting that when they were young, Houdini was kind of the believer because he always wanted to find his beloved mother. And Conan Doyle was the skeptic. He was a medical doctor. And they flipped as they went through their lives. And Houdini, of course, became the most famous, probably, debunker of all time. And Conan Doyle became the guy who toured the world lecturing on spiritualism. So their relationship came to a head in 1922 when their families were vacationing together, and Conan Doyle says to Houdini one afternoon, "My wife has taken up mediumship. Would you like to join us for a seance?" And Houdini, that was Houdini's reaction, I think, James. But he went up to the parlor where Lady Doyle was, and he sat down, and Lady Doyle at the time was practicing automatic writing as her mediumship. And so she would go into a trance, and then she would madly scribble page after page of these messages that she was supposedly getting from the spirit world. And as Houdini sat there, she produced 14 handwritten pages that were supposedly from his mother. He was so horrified by this and so outraged that it ended the friendship with Conan Doyle. As he noted, among other things, my mother didn't speak a word of English. These pages are in English. It completely killed their relationship. And after that, they became almost bitter enemies. In 1924, Houdini put out his book, A Magician Among the Spirits, which was his sort of debunking guide to the mediums. And he sent a copy to Conan Doyle, and Conan Doyle scrawled across the title page, "A malicious book." So their whole relationship to me was very, very interesting. And one of my favorite parts of writing the whole Séance book, I think.
Sorry, you faded out in the last part. What was it?
Oh, I think that their whole relationship was actually one of my favorite parts about writing the whole Séance book.
Oh, nice. I know they also used to, I think the two of them at one point used to hang out with Bram Stoker, the Dracula author.
Oh, okay. That I didn't encounter, but I can see that, sure.
Yeah, that was just one of their kind of peer group. I think more Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. than Houdini. But Houdini was like in the clique of, oh, you're famous and you're woo woo and you're kind of out there kind of thing. But I could see Houdini, like he was very upset. His cause was more to do with his mother and the trickery around it. And he was, my understanding anyway, is that what you found too? He was kind of getting really pissed at these people who were trying to lead him on. And he was a pretty mechanical thinking, he could put things together pretty quick in his head and with great attention to detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, one area where I differ from Houdini, because I tend to be a little bit on the skeptical side myself, but he did not believe that a medium could ever offer real comfort to anyone. That's something I don't agree with after doing all of the research for this book. I believe that is a genuine ability that some mediums possess. He was so against them that he thought even any comfort they offered people was somehow dishonest. And I just don't quite hold with that myself.
Yeah, he was completely embittered then by it.
Right.
He's one of those people that there are skeptics and there are, he's not a skeptic. He just says, no, it's like, don't talk to me about it.
Right.
The skeptics, you might have a chance of convincing them if you showed them something, but a lot of skeptics, and I find that too, when I first was on a paranormal team and we had a, social media presence, and we'd show a picture of something we got, and we'd have skeptics coming out of the woodwork saying, you couldn't take this picture, you faked it. And you can't express it, especially on social media. You can't express that, no, I didn't fake it. This is exactly what I took from the digital camera and put it on social media just to get your opinion. But you're completely shooting me down saying I faked it, or you automatically go into the negative. So those kind of people you aren't ever going to convince, and they will never leave their basement to go out and actually look themselves.
Yeah.
Or try to replicate the photo. And you just have to block them out and let that go and kind of be a little more open-minded, and then and call out when you do see something that's bogus, like obviously bogus, or something that's really, really being portrayed in a negative fashion.
Yeah.
And that's important. And in your type of writing too, like in your type of research, you want to not only show you this is what I found, and this is the line of facts. It's almost like my police reports. These are the line of facts. What do you think?
Yeah,
I'll leave it up to you, which is the fun part of your books. So, this is what I found. Now, what do you think?
Right. Yeah, that is my approach, because I am. My form of skepticism tends to take a slightly different thing. I am willing to look at any proof that's offered and consider it. Where I draw the skeptical line is I am not sure I believe that we are communicating with spirits of the dead. I'm open to other theories as well. I think I would love to be convinced. I'm always interested in seeing evidence. Sometimes I revise my own personal theories a little bit about that, but there's no question to me that something's going on. I just don't know what it is.
That's what's fascinated me. Because you don't know anything about me, but I've seen dead people all my life. I've seen full on. I was in a car accident when I was a kid, I was 16, and I saw the driver of the other car and his son at the hospital, and his son looked 100% fine. And then later my parents told me he had passed. And I told them, well, he looked fine to me. It must have been internal injuries. And they just stared at me because he died in the car.
Wow.
But I described him from head to toe. And I saw the shadows in my room and things like that. And then luckily, or we kind of say luckily, as my career as a policeman, where I saw real dead people, I wasn't seeing those anymore. It's like that got shut off. And I actually did. Out of the entire time I was a policeman, I saw one ghost. And she was standing outside a car looking in the car. And I didn't know it was a ghost until I got there and found out that I couldn't find her anywhere standing around the two cars. She had gone. I thought it was a witness, and she was the dead person in the car.
Wow.
And that's the only one out of the 28 years. And then now in 2012, I got back into kind of wanting the answers to those questions. So I joined a paranormal team, and we went out to haunted places, taking pictures of ghosts and talking to them. So I know I'm talking to something. I know I'm seeing something, and I know we're photographing something. What is it?
Right.
And why? And why are some just really pissy, and some are very clingy and hang out with you? So
Right.
yeah, that's the weird part for me.
Yeah, I do a weekly ghost report, we call it, on a podcast called Ghost Magnet with Bridget Marquardt. And Bridget is actually kind of one of the people that I turned around some of my skepticism a little bit, because I've been on some paranormal adventures with her, and she will walk into a room and say, "Oh, I feel heavy here. I can barely breathe." And that is always the room where some history happened. It's kind of, I mean, it is uncanny that she's almost always right when she gets that feeling.
Yeah.
So again, there's something going on there. She has some sort of special ability. I do too. I mean, it's like some of us can paint better or are better with math or whatever. And I think some people are hardwired to have some ability to witness or to experience something that the rest of us can't.
Yeah, it is odd. It's I've talked to people who can take it. Well, a good friend of mine who's a contractor, he actually has to physically think to turn it off. He was working not too far from here, cutting tile outside in a carport, and he shut the machine off, took his ear protection off, and he heard somebody talking behind him, and he turned and looked, and there were two men standing there, and one of the men looked at the other guy and said, "He can see us, can't he?" And they just turned and disappeared. But he's been seeing them all his life.
Wow.
And he's an interesting guy. He spent, I think, 4 years in the French Foreign Legion, and was this like MMA fighter kind of guy back in the day. He's a no nonsense kind of guy. And when he finally kind of said, "I've been seeing this stuff all my life. I don't really know what it is. What do you think?" And I was like, "Dude, you just have never turned." And this is I think we all have it when we're little, and we just shut it off. And some people don't, and it just continues. And he just never turned his off, or his never got blocked by, skepticism, religion, science, all these different things that tell us that these things should not exist. So who knows? And I know he definitely sees dead people, because he's described people coming out of houses and going back into houses that died, and all the neighbors knew exactly who he described. They said, "Oh yeah, it's the guy who used to live there," but he would never have known that. It's odd.
Yeah.
It's an odd thing to have. Have you ever seen shadows in your room when you were a kid or anything like that?
Never. Not only that, it's like I said, I do believe there's something to the way some people are just wired, because I have sat next to people who were witnessing things like that, and I saw, felt, heard nothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just something about, it's like I wish I was getting what they're getting, but I'm not. So yeah, it's just something to do with the way some of us are built somehow.
Well, it's funny. The podcast is called Ghost Magnet.
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, we have people in the paranormal community here we call ghost magnets.
Right. Yeah.
Like they'll walk into a room, and we know that they're going to come up with 10 photographs that no one else will. We've set tape recorders out, 3 or 4 tape recorders, and we'll get something on 2 of them and not another one, or we'll get something audible where we all hear it and it's not on a tape recorder. But it seems like the ghost magnet really activates all these weird things, we'll call them ghosts, activates things in the room. And if we were, some of us were sitting there, we wouldn't hear it without them being there.
Yeah, and as you were saying, Bridget is someone who has had this her whole life. So yeah, I've never seen anything like an apparition, shadow figures. I sat next to somebody at a paranormal investigation in the Stanley Hotel. He said something was touching him, and I mean, I'm 3 inches away and nothing's happening, you know. So I do not disbelieve him at all. He's a friend I've known for years and years and years, but somehow he experienced something I didn't. I did have something weird happen at the Stanley Hotel investigation, though, which was one of the things that I could not explain that kind of made me go, okay, whoa, that was strange, with a spirit box of all things. Do you know the Stanley at all, James? Have you been there?
Yes, I haven't been there, but I know of it. Yeah, I know the history.
Yeah, it's an amazing place, and we were actually doing an overnight investigation in their outbuilding, which is the concert hall, and some people think that concert hall is the most haunted part of the Stanley. It was built along with the rest of the hotel by F.O. Stanley, who built it for his wife because she was an East Coast matron, loved entertainment. And it's a very strange place. The night I was there, it was in October. It was very cold. It was like 3 in the morning. The wind is howling outside, and we're sitting in the balcony, which is pitch dark. And our investigator had a spirit box on, and it had been running for maybe 10, 15 minutes without anything really happening. And it suddenly blurted out a word that sounded very much like Mostelaria.
Mostelaria?
Mostelaria, yeah. And this made me go, did everyone else hear that? And people were like, yeah, what was that? I don't know what that word was. I had just been working on the classical history section of my book, Ghost to Haunted History, and I had, maybe a month before I'd gotten to the Stanley, I had researched the first Roman comedy about ghost is called Mostelaria, which means haunted house. So the fact that came up on a spirit box in Colorado at 3 in the morning, and I was the only one there who would have known what that was pretty weird.
That is beyond coincidental.
Yeah, that was very strange. And it's one of those things where as a skeptic, you kind of look back and go, well, what could that have been? I mean, I suppose it's remotely possible it was some DJ saying something like, mostly later, but
the other thing too is on a spirit box, if you're operating it, like when I turn them on, I put them cycling backwards, not forwards.
Right, yeah.
So you wouldn't get an entire multi-syllable word put together properly.
That was the other strange part about it, was that it was very definitely this like 4-syllable word, which you almost never get out of those things. So yeah, that was the strangest direct experience I've ever had.
Oh, you'll have more.
I hope so.
I was last June or the June before? June 26th, 2019. I was staying on the Queen Mary.
Oh yeah.
It was a very warm, very, very warm evening, had the porthole open. And God, it was freezing cold at 4 o'clock in the morning, absolutely freezing. And didn't even think anything of why it would have been so cold. Got up, shut the porthole, got in bed, put the blankets up over me. A second later, they all got pulled off and thrown on the floor. It's like,
wow.
And I had meditated and put a little bubble around me. Please leave me alone. I'm just here to sleep. So the next day I did the spirit box thing. And actually, I didn't do a spirit box. I put a recorder up and I said, were you trying to get my attention? Yes. Do you need some help? Yes. Well, if you let me sleep tonight, I'll help you later. So we eventually crossed over a guy named William who died on the boat back between 1939 and 1945, a crew member who had come there specifically because a friend and I, a psychic friend, she crosses people over. And I guess he knew it and he came and got my attention. and I just was not prepared for it at the time. But yeah, there happened. There's some very, very interesting areas in LA. If you get a chance, he's very eccentric. Go up to see David Omen's house.
I've been to the Omen House. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I did a thing there, and I was watching every time we mentioned the name Zach Bagans, stuff got thrown off the fish tank. It was amazing.
Right.
Yeah. And if you know David and talked to him about the whole Ghost Adventures thing, you'll understand why.
Yeah.
They did not like that, those guys at all. But that was kind of interesting for me. That I thought, okay, this is, I knew David from interviewing him, and like I say, he's a bit eccentric. And I thought, okay, what's this going to be like? And I was very surprised that it was as active and as physical as we found it that day. Yeah, it was very, very interesting. Did you get anything when you were there, or?
Very minor. There was a crew that had been there earlier that had left behind a child's keyboard, like a little piano keyboard. And at one point we were kind of asking for something to come forward, and the keyboard played a little tune for no apparent reason.
That's a clue.
That was pretty strange. And it was interesting that was the one time that I've done any of these where a lot of the activities seemed connected to me. When I would ask the question, the thing played, or Bridget would say something is here. Or by the end of the evening, David Omen was telling me that Sharon Tate really liked me, which, it's one of those things where you're both kind of skeptical and, wow, that would be cool if it was true.
Yeah, and now, just to understand too, she's not a ghost. She's actually crossed over.
Okay.
But her energy comes back and checks up on her old boyfriend, who is a ghost.
Right, okay.
So she comes and goes. And David is that way connected.
Yeah.
So he sees people who... He sees a couple of people that have crossed over and come back. So to me, a ghost is a human being who's, the meat sack dies, and then his energy is bouncing around going, what the heck am I supposed to be doing now? Where am I? What's going on? Where those kind of people I call spirits, they cross over and come back, and usually they're not seen. Those are the ones that, like, you got the 2-year-old talking to the invisible person, standing in a crib, and you show them pictures of the grandmother who's passed and like 5 other older people, and the little kid goes, that's the lady who talks to me. Yeah. So those people have crossed and come back. So as a paranormal investigator, you never really, like, they're not really interested in coming forward and talking to you. They just like, no, move on, living people. We've got stuff to do here.
Yeah.
But interesting. What other have you done the Queen Mary paranormal thing?
Oh yeah, I did an overnight investigation there in the engine room mostly. We were in a few other parts of the ship. We did go into the closed first class pool. Where supposedly we did, yeah, and it was very weird. Nothing happened there, despite the fact that Jackie, the little girl's spirit, is supposed to be found quite often in that area. It was creepy and weird and disturbing, but nothing happened. In the engine room, we had a couple of odd things where, again, it was the kind of thing where I'm standing next to a really good friend who did the investigation with me, and she says something's talking to me, and I'm hearing nothing. So that was another one of those experiences where I kind of envy some people who seem to be tuned into this stuff where I'm not. But I loved being there in the Queen Mary. We also got to spend a few hours in the one cabin that's supposed to be very haunted. The room number escapes me at the moment.
Yeah, that one now, they shut that one down for the longest time. For years, they shut it down.
Right.
Because people actually, they've even taken the room number off of the room because people are stealing it.
And it was an office for a while. They had, when I got to, this was just about, 2 years ago that I got to go in there. And in the off. It was an office, and there was nothing interesting about this cabin whatsoever in terms of how it looked. It was not even as beautiful as the regular hotel rooms are on board the Queen Mary, but again, we had nothing really interesting happen there. The engine room was where we got our most interesting stuff.
Yeah, I didn't recall getting much out of the engine room, but I was also with a group walking through it. So it's kind of hard, you know, to get stuff like go off by yourself for a bit, but the pool would have been interesting. That room, the scary, haunted, spooky room that was closed for such a long time, they've opened it up now, and it's 3 times the amount if you want to stay there overnight.
Oh, wow.
They've ghost tourism to that room. It's like, I think my room was about $90 and that one was $360, $370.
Oh, wow.
But they said, well, everyone asks for that room. Well, that's why you've jacked the prices up. And they've put in a game, you know, they've got a Ouija board in there.
Oh.
They've got how to play the game, Bloody Mary or something. It's like, okay, can you make it any more spooky? Like,
you're right.
Yeah, actually, if it is like some kind of weird, extremely haunted place, yeah, just crank it up a little bit more for your clients. But yeah, that was a little, I'm not a big fan of ghost tourism. Taking an old asylum and charging somebody $300 and selling them beer and to go in and, you know, talk to the dead people that may be in an old asylum who were absolutely tormented in life.
Right.
And now you're going to go poke a stick at them. So
yeah,
not a fan of that stuff.
Yeah.
But
yeah, respect is definitely an issue in some of this stuff.
Yeah, it is something. If you, again, you know, if you buy into the belief of these are dead people and they're dead humans that are stuck and they don't really know what they're like, where they are. And that's why I always been told you never want to say when you come into, especially going into somebody's house where they think their house is haunted because cabinets are opening and closing and TVs are coming on in the middle of the night. You never ask the question, hey, do you know you're dead? Because if they don't, at least you get to go home after an hour or two. But that ghost is now going, what the, and spinning in the house and the doors are flapping and things are going sideways. But you have no idea why they're trapped there. And that's kind of one of the things we run into when we're crossing dead people over. There's a number of reasons why they stay behind. And once you identify the reason they're there, they're easy to move along or cross over, I guess is a term. But it's just one question mark. You never get the answer, but you get 5 more questions.
All right.
And in your seance book, do you get up into modern seances at all, or what people do now?
Yes. You were mentioning earlier the idea that paranormal investigators sit in a circle and call on spirits and don't think that they're doing a seance. I actually have a theory that the 19th century spiritualist seance, when it entered the late 20th century, it split and it went off into 2 directions. So on the one hand, you have the mediums from the spiritualist age who now become our superstar psychics. And as you were talking about, many of them are practicing cold readings. They are trance mediums, not physical mediums, so much like the spiritualist mediums were. But then on the other hand, you have that interest in the scientific side of ghost hunting with the spiritualist who thought that everything they did could be proven scientifically, and that has become the modern paranormal investigation. So I really think spiritualism, which is still around, by the way, I shouldn't make it sound like spiritualism went away. It has changed, but it is still here. It's still a recognized church in both the UK, the US. But I really think that it did become those 2 branches. So I am absolutely with you that when you are doing a paranormal investigation, you are in essence conducting a seance. And it's interesting that not only does the paranormal investigation employ the scientific apparatus that many of the spiritualists were using in the 19th century, that kind of thing. I mean, that they didn't have spirit boxes, of course, but they had other things. But it also involves a group. And that's one of the things that's very unique about the seance, which one of the things I do in my book is I chart how spirits were called before the 19th century. And it was invariably a solo activity. You were either a magician who was calling forth these spirits, often to gain prophecy, or you were the lone grieving person who wanted to communicate with your lost loved one, and you had to do this alone. So one of the revolutionary ideas behind that Victorian seance, the spiritualist seance, was that it was performed as a group. And there again, I see that in the paranormal investigation, that it has to be performed as a group. I mean, certainly there are people who are probably trying to do investigations on their own without a group, but we don't see many of them on television.
No. And a lot of the ones you do see on television aren't real. It's an entertainment medium as opposed to a legitimate investigation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the, you and I both know one of the most popular ones, when they say they're going to be locked down overnight, they're actually only there for 2 or 3 hours. It's not a whole overnight thing.
Yeah.
And that group were at the Birdcage in Tombstone, Arizona, where my friend actually runs the last existing mortuary in Tombstone, a couple of doors down, Watt and Tarbell mortuary. From the Birdcage, they had this TV show had some of the people dressed up in period costumes. And I think they said, we have a picture of a ghost. And it was just one of the employees walking around a corner, and they blurred it. It's like, but I don't think they're going to be allowed back. Let's put it that way. It was entertainment only. But you go back 10, 15 years when the very first paranormal television shows started coming out. And it did open the door to a whole other form of, we'll call it entertainment, but a form of thought on life after death, and which got people talking about it, which got your grandmother coming out of the woodwork, your living grandmother, saying, oh, when I was a kid, we used to see ghosts in this house once we lived in. And you're looking at her going, what? You've never talked about that before? Well, because you would have locked me up.
Yeah.
But now the guys on TV are talking about it, and and it expanded into Bigfoot and ufology, and more people are comfortable with mentioning it over supper than they were back 30, 40 years ago.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. And it's interesting that it actually all started with a British show called Most Haunted, which preceded Ghost Hunters here. Ghost Hunters kind of exploded in the US. Most Haunted came first and was a similar kind of show. It still is airing, and but they employed much more of they had a medium who was always involved with Most Haunted, and Most Haunted was also a little bit more dramatized, deliberately, almost archly in some cases. If you watch some of the Most Haunted episodes, they're lit like an Italian horror movie sometimes. They're certainly very entertaining, but so is Ghost Hunters, so is Ghost Adventures. I'll put these things on every once in a while when I watch a bad horror movie, because they're often far more entertaining than bad horror movies.
I like the Dead Files because I'm a policeman, and they've got a retired cop, and they have a medium, and they actually come up with a solution. And the people's houses they go to are like, they're not like, I think there's a ghost in the closet. No, my 8-year-old sees 5 people flying out of a wall, and there's something coming around a corner, and all our dishes get thrown against the walls. And so they're lucky enough to be more popular where they can pick the weirdest places in the US, travel to them and go, yeah, your house is friggin' nuts.
Right.
And you should move. Or you need a shaman, or you need a priest, or you need some gasoline and a match, because you got to get out of here. You've got to do something. So I kind of like them, because there is kind of this is a challenge you have. This is a possible solution. Go. Yeah. Where the other ones are walking around saying, well, we filmed for the last 8 hours, really 2, and we didn't get anything. Like, I've been on paranormal teams where you get photographs of ghosts every 2 weeks.
Yeah, right.
And you watch some of these television shows, and they've been on for 10 years, and they haven't got one yet. It's like, well, come out with us on a weekend. My gosh, you can get them, but again, you've got to get your ghost magnet. They got to come. Right. You got to get your Bridget to come with you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because she's gonna get them going, and that is still fascinating for me. And I would always, and I'm one of those people who defer to I'll bring a psychic on a paranormal investigation, because you're in a hotel. Instead of going to every room to find out where the ghost is, the psychic will say, room 23. Well, right. You've never been here before. I know, but room 23. So it cuts down to 6 hours of wandering through a building.
Right.
Yeah. So it's funny, when you were talking about the Stanley Hotel, you said the ballroom was quite active. What have you, on your experiences, where have you found, what types of properties have you found, and I'll give you my list later, are more active than others?
Yeah, at the Stanley, my experience was the concert hall. I know the ballroom is actually.
I apologize. I meant the concert hall.
You're right, and the ballroom is also supposed to be active. I was in the ballroom. I heard the stories. I know it was the site of the explosion they had in 1911, and there were a lot of things that almost like residual hauntings that people would encounter in that ballroom. I didn't get anything there at all, but the concert hall was very active. I mean, with the Stanley, there is that theory that one of the reasons it is so active is that it's built on this massive deposit of quartz that is there on the side of that hill. Now, I don't know. That certainly isn't the case with the Queen Mary. It's not sitting on any bed of quartz. And
yeah, it doesn't need to. It's sitting on moving water.
Right.
And it's made of metal.
Yeah. So, and it's surely one of the most haunted locations in the world, I think. So I don't know. It doesn't seem, the Omen House is another one that is built on the side of a mountain, and there are some odd magnetic anomalies within that part of the Santa Monica Hills.
And it's got big iron girder, like things going in, 4 big posts that go into the side of the mountain.
Yeah, and did you actually get to go down to the very bottom of the house?
In the basement, in that little dirt area.
That weird thing where you're standing there you're standing in a guy's house staring at the side of the mountain. It's really strange. I mean, my dad had a house a little bit like that when I was a kid up in the mountains here above LA, but I'd never seen anything like that, and there was a weird feeling in that room. Even for me, who doesn't get that kind of stuff, just this sense of like almost that pressure that this mountain is like standing there right there next to you is really strange.
Yeah, Dr. Barry Taff, who ran the parapsychology unit at UCLA back in the 70s, they were doing experiments in remote viewing and things like that. He is physically affected by too much EMF rate, energy. He gets sick going to the Omen House.
Yeah, I've heard that.
He's the one who called it Disneyland for the dead, because there's the energy there just attracts dead people because they feel good.
Yeah,
and
I've also heard him call it the Mount Everest of haunted houses.
Yeah, but he won't go back there at all. And he gets, it's kind of funny talking to Barry about stuff like that. But it's interesting. I've found that the more haunted places are, I think dead people are everywhere. Sorry, I shouldn't say dead people. People who have died and not crossed over. So we'll call them ghosts. They're absolutely everywhere. It's just there's some places we can see them more. And it's their access to energy. Tombstone, Arizona literally has silver mines underneath it. It's got a lot of quartz in the ground. Old ghost towns from gold mines, there's always full of quartz, and there's usually moving water, like a river beside it or creek. Some places, underground rivers and underground creeks. Here in British Columbia and Washington State, we have the tip of Vancouver Island, and across from that is the top of the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. The Pacific Ocean squeezes in that point twice a day. The tides coming in, tides going out, creating a huge amount of energy. And those two locations are some of the most, said to be the most haunted areas in North America. I don't think they're that more haunted than anywhere else. It's just that something that is energy can tap into that and become visible. Railway stations, where the tracks, where the railway tracks maybe cross a river not too far away. You'll see ghosts a lot of times. People say, well, I see them walking along the railway. Yeah, they're walking all over the place. It's just you happen to see them there. And of course, when we're doing paranormal investigations, we always seem to have more activity in schools, churches, hotels and bars, and theaters. Those are because they're full of positive energy and people going there being happy. It's just all the ghosts kind of go down and hang out and feel and kind of live and get a little bit of a rush off the energy of the people that are there, and go back to the places they had fun. And maybe the old abandoned theater is still full of ghosts because they're all watching something that happened back in the day. Who knows? Again, a basket full of question marks to go out and do stuff with.
Although here in LA, we have a couple of haunted theaters where it seems to be less haunted by people who had a good time and more haunted by people who wanted to be stars and failed. So
they're just not letting go.
Yeah, I think the Pantages in Hollywood is one of those, and it used to be I mean, it still is. It's been a movie theater. It currently is like a Broadway theater in LA, and it's supposed to be fairly haunted. And I think their spirit is said to be somebody whose career failed. So.
Yeah, fascinating. We had one of my friends is paranormal stuff here in Vancouver, and they were at it's a studio up Lionsgate, well, near, you heard of Lionsgate Films, right?
All right, sure.
Yeah. So Lionsgate, there's an old distillery, Park and Tilford Gardens, which was turned into television studios years ago. That's where I was filming Airwolf back in the 80s. That was one of the first productions there. One of the employees passed in a car accident, I think a year or two ago, and they were doing a paranormal investigation in the studios, and they have a picture of her wearing the same clothes she was wearing when she was in the car accident, standing in a doorway, and another ghost a little bit closer. But the girl, and one of the people on the investigation was a friend of the girl who passed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So she's back at work because she liked to work.
Right.
Yeah. So, that's interesting. It's like sticking around at your place of employment because that's where you felt better. And we have the 4 reasons why people allegedly don't cross. Is one is their children, and they really, they're going to wait for mom and dad because they don't know who this person's coming by saying, come on, you got to go with me. No, stranger danger, waiting for mom or dad. Those who don't know they're dead, whole other issue with like explosions and stuff like that. Those who have a fear of crossing because of a religious belief, like I coveted my neighbor's wife, therefore I'm going to go to hell, so I'm not going to go. And the other ones are they still think they have something to do, or they're still not finished what they were doing for somebody else, like building something, or I can't leave. I'm a nurse in a hospital. I can't leave my poor patients, that kind of thing. And they'll come back, and they'll not cross over because they perceive they still have something to do. So a lot of times those people will hang around at work. The theater, in the theater, the actor, I never got to where I wanted to go. So let me keep trying here. I can actually be around people who are doing stuff, and they're not going to ask me to leave.
And I actually think that's right, because one of the interesting things to me is how few cemeteries are really haunted. People tend to think immediately, oh, cemeteries are all very haunted. I have really not encountered a lot that are. I mean, Père Lachaise in Paris, I know there are reports of hauntings there, but very few cemeteries report a lot of hauntings. And I think it's because, hey, if I was dead, I wouldn't want to just hang around.
Yeah, why would you hang out in cemeteries full of corpses? Like what do you want to do? But I have found that, and I don't, this is where I get the spirit ghost thing kind of, it overlaps. If you want to get a voice or something, if you want to get something out of a cemetery, read the tombstone out loud.
Ah.
And literally they'll go, it's like they'll show up going, who are you? Do I know you? What are you doing here? Why are you saying my name? Like, what's going on? If you've got Bridget with you, if you've got your ghost magnet, they'll come through and want to know who you are and why you were reading the whole family's names on the tombstones.
Right.
Yeah, or you'll get the, you know, the one that maybe, well, I ran into a ghost. I was walking on the street. We were at a theater, and across the street from the theater was a shopping mall. But back in the 1930s, it was a mortuary. When the mortuary got torn down, a bunch of the dead people who were, and the reason they're hanging out in the mortuary, this lady we were talking to, she was waiting for her husband. She passed first. And she didn't want to go until her husband left, and she waited in the mortuary, but he died somewhere else and was taken somewhere else. So when the mortuary shut down, she moved across, like they had shamans and, you know, everybody, every religious denomination came in, blessed the land, moved. I guess some people may have crossed over, and others just, oh, I'm gonna still hang out. I kind of like this area. And they came across the street and they were in the theater. So she was this very proper lady describing to us what the neighborhood looked like in the 1930s, where the you know, it's right in a downtown city, but the horse barns were down there, and these people had a garden over here, and she wasn't going to cross. There was no way. She liked the theater, she liked the energy of the theater, and she was having fun. So
wow,
excellent. But
that's a great story.
Yeah, but she was hanging out in where dead people hang out. Yeah. And it was the first time I ran into an actual, or perceived to run into somebody who's hanging out in a place where there's dead people. But that reading the tombstone thing, that's about the only way I've ever got a voice. And they're very, very questioning, or they're like, who are you? What are you doing? I don't want to talk to you.
Right.
That's it. They come in, look, go, we're gone.
Hmm.
Yeah. But I was in a cemetery in Cuba, in Havana. It's huge European, like above ground crypts and things, and it was amazing in there. And this is before that side of my brain kind of turned into going, oh, we should talk to a ghost. But I often want to go back and go, oh, this would be kind of cool. Not that I speak Spanish, but that would be kind of a cool place.
It would. It sounds somewhat similar to the cemeteries in New Orleans, which are all above ground because the ground is so soggy. So. Yeah,
that would be cool. So seances, huh? Now I want to have a seance. Or should I? What do you think? Have you had a seance?
I haven't really done one since I did the book. I mean, as a kid, I did things with friends and that kind of thing, but I would really love to do one now that it's led by a real medium. There were a couple that were going to happen until the pandemic came along. So I am waiting for things to open up again, and then I definitely want to take part in a few.
Oh, you have a pandemic too? So do we. It's that apocalypse. It's really thrown things for a loop, but I've saved a lot of money in travel. I videotaped a seance for a friend who had it at a little woo-woo store that had a lot of psychics working at it, and they had a seance. So I went and set up camera systems for them, and we used night vision and infrared cameras maybe to see if a spirit came through, we could get a picture of it, but nothing.
Yeah.
But that was it. Do you ever use a Ouija board?
Again, just, have
as a kid
messed around with it as a kid. Yeah.
I was interviewing a lady, Karen Dahlman, who's like the queen of the Ouija boards, and She uses them like you would use a spirit box to talk to somebody. And she was telling me it's all about the intent. As long as your intent is positive, you're not going to open a door to some creepy thing. And, focus, intent, and love, and light, and woo-woo. So as she's describing it to me, and I'm doing a podcast, and she's describing it to me, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should try it. I really think, and I'm talking myself into it. And I got grabbed by the back of my collar of my shirt and pulled back in my chair. It's like a thump, and it scared me. And I turned around thinking it was my daughter. I could come in the room and snuck up on me. My heart was in my throat. Not a soul in the room.
Wow.
And I was told by a psychic friend of mine, she's, yeah, it was your dad. He stepped in to say, no, you're not going to use a Ouija board. It's basically say, no, you're not, because no matter, it comes down to intent. And though I may have thought my intent was pure, I may have been thinking, oh, what if I do something wrong? So I would open a door to something creepy, which is a whole other, that's your next book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it almost is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably going to do, it's still a little bit up in the air, but the company I did these other books with, we're starting to talk about maybe doing a history of possession. So,
oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I was watching a documentary on Nancy. I can't remember her last name now. She's a doctor, a psychologist who interviewed serial killers. And she talked to them about their reasons. And it was, she described it, and she was the proponent of multiple personality disorder, MPD, which other psychologists back in the day said, well, and still to this day say doesn't really exist.
Right.
But she would get called by defense counsel to say, my client here is on death row, and we just think he's friggin' nuts. And you should come to court and say, he's got all these multiple personalities. He's being told to do stuff. Somebody stepped in, and because he was abused as a child, at this point, he's created this other entity that protects him, which is the violent one. But when that entity isn't with him, he's very docile, and he's got another entity, which is, and I'm looking at it with my woo-woo side. I'm going, friggin', he's got all these really nasty ghosts to step in and take over. These aren't multiple personalities, but then again, maybe what we think a possession is just a multiple personality disorder. Right.
My name is Legion, from the Bible. So.
Yeah, it is. That's a whole interesting thing, the possession. I know that we did a paranormal investment. Like, I wasn't on this one, but my paranormal team did one at a house here in Vancouver, British Columbia. A young couple had lived in the house, a very old house. Well, very old for British Columbia, 1920s, 1930s. And they came in, and the wife said, there's a guy in this house. He hates me. The day they moved in, she was walking from the living room down a hall, past the fireplace on the right, into the kitchen area. And she heard a man basically swear at her. Just, you get out of here, you effing blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
And she heard him. She thought, oh, that's kind of awkward. And her husband, one time he had a really bad cold, and he was like really knocked him down, and he was sitting at the kitchen table, and she said she was talking to him. He looked at her, and his eyes had changed, and he stood up and said, effing bitch, and punched her right in the head.
Wow.
Completely not his personality, everything. So of course the police get there, he's being hauled away, and by the time he's yelling and screaming. By the time he hits the porch, he's completely in tears. And it's like, I don't know why I did that. I don't know. I'm sorry. So 6 months later, he's had too much to drink. It does the exact same thing. So it's like he gets a place where his vibration drops really, really low. And this guy would step in and say, now I'm lay a licking on your wife because I don't like her.
Oh.
So the two investigators that were there were both female, and he did not like them. And they were picking up his voice, basically telling them to F off and get out of this place, you so-and-sos. And so, yeah, so they moved. The couple moved, and he has never touched his wife since. But that was weird. Imagine going to court and saying, Your Honor, it's a dead guy in the house who doesn't like his wife. My client's completely innocent.
I'm sure it's been done a lot.
Yeah, sure it has. We're talking to Lisa Morton. She is an author, and we're talking about one of the books I want to talk to you about. We'll have to have you back and talk about the ghost of haunted history. But we're talking about Calling the Spirits, History of Séance, and you can get that anywhere a book is sold. Go to the Amazons and check it out there. It's been out about 6 weeks, and hurry up. So go get it before Christmas, and it'll be a good stocking stuffer to scare the heck out of your children. Get it for your children. Does it have a age warning on it? 4 and up or something? No, don't do that. It'd be kind of funny though, because I'm weird that way. History of Seance. Where is it more prevalent? Is that more a Western world phenomena, or do you find that they have a different methodology in China or in Europe?
It's definitely a Western idea, the whole seance thing. Again, if you look at other parts of the world, it's more like the Western world before the seance. It's more of a solitary activity. There are, of course, many parts of the world that don't believe that spirits come back at all. It's certainly not a belief in any part of Muslim religion, in the Buddhist and so forth. Hindu beliefs may accommodate the hungry ghost that comes back, but it tends to be something that comes back at certain times of the year. And so, yeah, the Hungry Ghost Festival in China is a situation like that. So, yeah, the seance is very Western.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that we've kind of bought into the idea of ghosts and hauntings, where other cultures, been on the planet as long as us, don't.
Right.
I know that we have a large Chinese, and I mean off the boat Chinese population here in Western Canada, and that culture is very, very superstitious when it comes to the dead.
Yeah.
There was I can't remember if it was going to be a morgue or something up by the university here in British Columbia, University of BC. They were going to build I can't remember, it was a mortuary or something, right next to where they built or putting up high-rise apartments that were pre-sold. And a lot of them were pre-sold overseas to Chinese. And it was like, it was going to be a riot. It was like, nope, you can't build that anywhere near where we're going to live, because there's dead people.
Yeah.
Dude, there's dead people everywhere. Like this, the land has been around for a while and a lot of people dead on it. But so that was kind of odd, but they don't believe in ghosts, but you protect your house from spirits.
Well, the Chinese definitely believe in ghosts. The Muslims don't believe in ghosts, although they will explain things like a haunting by saying that it is a jinn, which is a sort of evil spirit that has been translated into English as the genie. But the original jinn is very different from the way we imagine the genie. They were essentially these sort of other dimensional demon beings.
Yeah. And
they might pose as a dead person to fool you into believing that there was a ghost. So yeah, but there is nothing like the seance in either any Muslim country or China, and Buddhism, Hinduism. It's, if you're going to try and call a spirit, you're probably a monk. And it's a solo belief. It's something you do on your own.
Yeah. It is a interesting prospect too, when you're looking at some of the other cultures where, or even religions where you get, excuse me, Catholics and ghost hunting. A few years ago, I had a live podcast that was on about 3 hours on the weekend, and I had demonologists on. Well, they were only demonologists because they were Catholic and didn't believe in ghosts. but they were paranormal investigators.
Right.
So if you had a ghost in your house and you happen to look online or look in the yellow pages for ghost hunters and get these guys, they would come and basically blame you for bringing in demons.
Right.
No, I think it's my grandmother. She said I was going to have a really good life. Nope, it's a demon. But
Yeah.
she said really nice things. Nope, it's a demon. Really? It's like, why? Because I'm Catholic and we don't believe in that stuff.
Right. Right. Yeah, you can trace that all the way back to the origins of Catholic philosophy and the early Christian thinkers, St. Augustine and so forth, who all believed that there was no way for dead spirits to return. So if you saw a ghost, it must be a demon who was posing as your dead loved one. Although they changed that a little if you saw a saint. If the ghost that you saw was a saint, then that probably really was the saint.
Well, that's good then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or no. It's it is a little strange, our perception, and as we go through time, how to change things. I had a spirit guide that was Pan, basically a gohart, which is half man, half goat. The Greek, at one time, the Greek god of the hillsides.
Right.
For the ancient Greeks, civilization changed and he became a demon. Poor guy was just standing on a hillside and we're labeling him. It's like, I'm just doing my thing. You guys keep changing my name as your belief system changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, of course, there's some speculation that Pan, who was a satyr, may have been the precursor to Satan. That the Catholic Church might have taken that pagan god and moved it into this demonic being because they were trying to put down, of course, all of the pagan beliefs.
Yep. Yeah. And he was one of the more active elemental beings in the pagan belief system.
Right.
And easy to easy to put a face on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, here's the guy with the horns and the goat feet.
Right.
Yeah. So poor guy. Hey, hold on. She's my spirit guide. What am I saying? Yeah, it's odd. What do you think about the whole spirit guides and elemental beings and all that other woo-woo stuff?
Again, it's one of those things that I am not convinced one way or the other on any of it. I am certainly open to the possibility. The whole idea of elementals is very interesting to me just because it's so terrifying. As a horror fiction writer, I've used elementals. I love that. I mean, as a fiction writer, I think it's great. If they actually exist, it's a terrible thing. But when I was at the Stanley Hotel, our paranormal investigator absolutely believed that there was an elemental that lived in part of the concert hall. And there was a very weird corner of the stage that just abruptly fell off into darkness. The stage was one of the few areas that was lit when I was there. And the stage looked perfectly fine except for this one corner at the back, which just went boom. And it was something a couple of people walked by it in our group and said, that area is weird. And the paranormal investigator said, I believe there's an elemental back there. So.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I know that we had an issue in this house where I'm in now. I had a whole bunch of dead people downstairs. Which could be an issue legally, I guess. No, I had a bunch of beings and some dead people that came through a portal. Long story. But anyway, I had a shaman and a psychic come. They were moving some of these beings out, kind of shape-shifting beings. And there were four elemental beings connected to the land that the house is on, actually came up and helped the shaman and the psychic move these beings out. And then the elemental beings went back to looking after the land.
Well, that's interesting.
That's
because
what they told me.
A lot of the ghost mythology beliefs, the elementals are almost always evil. So
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear that. Yeah.
No, they're mostly not. But we've been told they're demons.
Right.
And that's I talked to a very interesting guy who you should actually go on his show. Sean Whittington, who is he's a, I call it a demonologist, but he can actually see them. And he'll come up to a house, and he's in Las Vegas. He'll actually scream as he's coming up to the house. He'll pull them out of the house. And that gets into possession. He'd be a good guy to interview in possessions, because he actually was involved in a kid who had one of these had an attachment. His wife, on the other hand, can see ghosts, like dead people. He can't. He just sees these black things in weird shapes and like big birds and whatever. But he and I have that conversation back and forth, whether they're elemental beings or what he calls in the biblical demon realm. So we always have that kind of debate back and forth. I know there's elemental beings that really don't like us. And they, like, have you heard the expression having a monkey on your back?
Right.
Yeah. It's people who can see this thing, looks like a monkey coming out of your back. It's got the face of a cat and red eyes. And the face is here, and it kind of gets allegedly in between you and source energy when you're in a low state. You're a higher vibration person dropped into a low state through illness, addiction, or drug use or alcohol use. It attaches and then feeds off the energy that you should be getting and keeps you low. And even though you can go through recovery, it's still attached. And you walk out and boom, back into addiction. You literally need it removed. And then once it's removed, it doesn't leave you it doesn't go that far. It's just waiting for you to dip again. Because that's what it does. And that's a jackass elemental being. But definitely falls under the demon category. If you had a Western religion background, it's like, holy crap, that's definitely a demon. It's got red eyes, it looks like a cat, and it's sucking the life out of a person. Yeah, pretty much. By my understanding, that's an elemental being that just feeds off humans.
Wow.
But again, that's maybe the next book after that.
Yeah.
We'll keep going through your book system. But that's the fun thing about being on these kind of shows or talking to people like you, is I get to learn all the stuff that you've gone out and investigated, and then I can kind of poke around at it. So now I have to go get your book.
Oh no!
and read about seances, which it's always kind of fascinated me. Now I'm actually, wondering if there's any. Well, no, I do seances, or I used to. I just do the paranormal investigation thing. To me, that's a seance. I can do it. I don't think table tipping is going to really help.
Right.
Or, spilling water. Did you find that there are people charging for seances nowadays?
Well, if you go after, say, the corner psychic, and that varies, of course, depending on where you are, because a lot of areas still it's not legal to be a psychic, but here in LA it is legal. And
right.
You drive around LA and there is a psychic in every block with the signs out and everything. So I'm very skeptical about a lot of the abilities. There may be a few that are genuine, there may be a few that really believe in helping people, but I think a lot of them are probably there to make a living.
Yeah.
And not always a completely legit living. So, like I said, when I was researching the book, I came across a couple of those long-term scams that they will pursue, where it will be just this endless, oh, wait, your mother says that there's something you have to know, but we're going to need this special equipment, so you have to give me $1,000. Oh, wait, I can restore. There was one that was amazing. There was one scam I read about that was a man wanted to know what had happened to his lost love. And the psychic ended up telling him that the lost love was dead, but she could reincarnate the lost love for him. And this guy got taken to the tune of like $150,000.
Oh, geez.
So yeah, that was a disturbing one. So
we had a couple here that were picking on West African communities, a West African psychic / witch. And she would, for $500 a month, she would make sure evil spirits didn't affect your job search or your kids' schooling and things like that. And, you know, all you need is half a dozen clients at $500 to $1,000 a month, and you're doing
Right.
well. And she was arrested for it, for
Yeah.
fraud. Because it used to be there, it still may be somewhere in our criminal code here in Canada that some variation of psychic or witchcraft or something is unlawful when you get into exchange of money. But I don't know if that I knew it was in mid 80s. They had a case or a law like that, but I don't know if it's still in the books. But yeah, I know in the US there's a few states that can't do that.
Yeah.
Can't be a psychic.
And in some states, it has to be offered as entertainment only. Obviously, all they do is they have a sign up when you go into their room that says this is only for entertainment, and they're following the law at that point. So.
Yeah. I will entertain you for $120.
Right.
Yeah, it's like I do readings for people, but I don't really charge. If they want to give me money, I just send them to my Patreon account for my podcast and say, yeah, $3 a month. There you go, $37 a year.
Yeah.
So if you really think what I did was helped you out at all, but it was awkward. I got asked to do it for money because one of the psychics didn't show up for a week. She was off for a week, and they needed somebody to fill in to read cards, and I said I could do it, but then they said, "Oh, you'll pay a lot for it." I was like, "Ooh, I don't know. I'm just starting this. I don't know if I want to take money from people." But you know, the people I read for it all worked out for them really well. So you know, I did that, but I don't do that anymore. That's not where I'm at in my life. So there's other people like that. I did interview. I interview a lot of psychics on here. I get like, what was it like as a kid growing up, and what did you see, and things like that. But I did interview a lady here once. She claimed to have worked on a serial killer that was in this part of Canada. And she was, you know, I worked on that file, and I helped the police, and this is what we did. And I'm not looking at her because it was over the phone or doing the interview on the podcast. And I worked on that file. We didn't have a psychic working for us. It's like, you can't be throwing out, you know, I worked on this famous serial killer case, Robert Picton, and, you know, I was instrumental in file. It's like, you have no idea who I am. I actually worked on that file, and we didn't have a psychic. So smarten up.
Yeah.
And she would make up a bunch of other stuff. I literally, because I pre-recorded it never made it to air. I just deleted the whole thing because she was full of crap.
Yeah.
I think one thing she did, she predicted an earthquake. She claimed to have predicted an earthquake in Malaysia or someplace. And within 2 years, there was an earthquake in Malaysia. And all of a sudden, she had this following in Malaysia, and she was doing readings for them over the phone for a lot of money.
Well, of course, if I just wrote down 100 predictions, the odds are that a few of them would come true at some point or other. So yeah, I'm not a big believer in that kind of thing.
Yeah, I predict there may be volcanic activity in Iceland.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the big island of Hawaii, there could be volcanic activity. And of course, when you're at a certain point in your life when you want to believe and you want to hold out, I need help somewhere from someone, and these people show up, they will, even this is what bugged me about some paranormal teams. They would, you know, you've got a haunted house, and a legitimate, there's something, like I say, banging doors and opening stuff. Or there's noises in the walls, and they call the paranormal team, and they get in there and say, you know, I've got a shaman who can fix this. You leave the house for, you know, 8 hours, and you come back, and we'll guarantee this demon will be out of here. And what they're doing is they're catching a raccoon that's living in your ceiling up in the attic. And then they say the shaman says for $300 a month, it'll never come back.
Right.
And they've done it. And so don't pay for a paranormal team. Like paranormal teams want. The other thing too is everybody's a paranormal team right now who can get a tape recorder and a camera, and you're letting them in your house.
Yeah.
Who are these people? Like, anyway, this is the cop in me coming out again. And again, when I got on the paranormal team, I said, well, if you get a phone call saying that somebody wants to talk to you about a ghost in their house, don't go by yourself to talk to the person. Meet them in a public place. Go as a group. Take notes. As a policeman, I have gone to investigations where somebody has written down all the experiences that they've had in the house, the flashing lights, the clicking noises in their wall sockets, and the neighbors listening to me through the wall. They always know when I'm having a bath. Really? And I've written it down, and they've written in the edges of the newspaper, and they've got napkins, and they've got binders of information. They're paranoid schizophrenics.
Yeah.
And if you there is a case here in Ontario, Canada, where the policeman went to I'm being like, something's following me, and I've got all these notes, and the policeman said, "Oh, let me look at your notes," and he took them from the guy, and the guy killed the policeman.
Nice.
Because he thought the policeman was one of them who've come to gather all his evidence.
Wow.
So he phoned up the police, and he says, "Yeah, before the real policeman got here, this other guy came and tried to take my evidence, and I killed him." It's like, okay, you stay there. And so, not that crazy people, or I shouldn't say crazy, people with mental health challenges can't live in a haunted house. They can. But it doesn't mean you have to investigate that.
Right.
You've got to be very careful on the people whose houses you're walking into. And if you have a paranoid schizophrenic person, they are going to hear things, and they are going to see things, and they're going to make notes of it. And if the police aren't going to help them, and the neighbors aren't helping, the landlord's not helping, the paranormal community is now, must be a ghost. We'll call them down and do it. And so be careful when you go to somebody's house. And take
Good
witnesses.
advice for anyone.
Yeah, take witnesses, record things. Photograph the house as soon as you walk in. Take all the pictures. So when you leave and they say, my big screen TV is gone, you can say, there wasn't one in the house when we got here, according to our photos. So yeah, it's a weird phenomena right now. And even people opening the doors to strangers and letting them in with recording equipment and to walk in all the different rooms of the house. And I did it, and I was uncomfortable going into somebody's house.
Yeah.
It's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
But seances are okay because you can just set up a table in the kitchen and the dining room, and lights and candles, and I don't know. I don't know about seances. They're something that I'm not really convinced of either. That they're any more connected to dead people than anything else. I think anybody can talk to a dead person, whether you can hear them or not. It's a whole other thing. But I am going to get your book because I want to. Calling the Spirits, History of Seances. Lisa Morton. That's kind of cool. Thank you very much for dropping by. And sorry I did all the talking.
Oh, it was fascinating. Thank you.
Yes, but I do want to talk to you about more ghosts and haunted history and some of the places you've been to that we touched on briefly, like the Queen Mary and the Stanley Hotel and places like that. Have you been to the Winchester House?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't feel anything except one room, which was the one they did the seances in.
Right.
And that was it. And it was sparkly compared to everywhere else in the house. It was like energetically sparkly, but I don't know if it was.
I know the room. Yeah. But it was interesting because I took the tour, just the regular tour, and the house, I mean, aside from paranormal stuff, the house was not nearly as crazy or as big as I thought it would be. It was just kind of an oddball house. So it was interesting. I'm glad I went, but it wasn't quite what I was expecting.
I got lucky when I went, it was a year ago, I think, and I had, I hit where you could have the double tour and actually tour the part of the house that's under construction still.
Right.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool just to see the wood and that 100-plus-year-old wood that you couldn't get a nail through, and the frame of the house itself. That I found really more of a like engineering feet to see how it was built. That was very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another place, what's it called? It's a school for boys up in Sacramento area, outside of Sacramento. Preston Castle, Preston School of Industry. If you ever get a chance to get up there, back in the day, California was very forward thinking in their corrections, believe it or not. But back in the day, in the late 1800s, you stole a horse and you were 12 years old and you got caught. You got sent to Folsom or San Quentin as a kid.
Right.
And they said, you know what, that's not really working well. So we're going to build a prison for boys. And that was the Preston School of Industry, where they taught you a trade. They taught you leather work or woodwork or whatever. And it was the only hospital for the whole area too.
Oh.
So it had an infirmary. So people would come there and have kids, like women would come and have their babies there. And if somebody got injured on the farm or in the mining, they could go there. So it opened up. And then when the Depression hit, let's say your typical farm family back in the day might have had 6, 7 kids, and dang it, I can't really feed everybody. So we're going to send the 3 oldest boys to the Preston School. So they started mixing the kids who were there sentenced to be in prison there along with everybody else. So it was a very, very interesting school. There were a number of deaths in the school. One of the kids got shot by a guard and was killed. Allegedly, it was a warning shot. The guard said it was a warning shot, but shot him in the back. A few kids died in school. Rumor has it, when you go on the tour there and do the paranormal tour, that the doctor, if the school didn't like you or you were causing problems, if you went to the infirmary with a broken leg, you may die. They would literally put you to sleep there. And there was a rape or murder, or there's a murder of one of the women that worked there. And it was a very famous murder case that I don't believe was solved. My gut feeling was one of the other employees, adult employees, did it. It wasn't one of the kids, but they wrote it off as some kid had done it. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting place and very, very haunted. Great.
Incredible. Yeah, I definitely will look that up.
Yeah, Preston School of Industry, also called the Preston Castle.
Okay.
Yeah, it's and they do a little paranormal conference, I think, once a year, where they have a number of groups come, and then you do a big paranormal investigation. Very, very cool place. California's lovely with strange locations.
Yes, it is.
It's like, yes, I remember Hollywood in the 70s. Yeah, that was anyway. Actually, I had a girlfriend that worked. She and her family had a business beside Frederickson of Hollywood on Hollywood Boulevard. It was Book City Collectibles.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So the Siegel family and Marcy and I dated when I used to go down there for the winter. Yeah. And she worked in the place that sold the old autographs and autograph photos and things. And her brother and her parents ran the book side of things, which unfortunately is all closed now. But that was a cool place.
It sure was. Yeah.
That with Marcy, I'd poke around a lot of those old places in old Hollywood, a lot of those old buildings and a lot of those old restaurants and places. So funky place. I want to come back as soon as this apocalypse is over.
Definitely.
Darn it. You doing conferences, or were you doing conferences before the apocalypse hit?
Most of my traveling goes to writing conferences. I'd love to get more into the paranormal things, and I know there's the big one that's in Virginia City. I think had it not been for the pandemic, I was going to try to get to that one. And
I would have seen you there. I had a table there.
Oh wow, yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, I was supposed to be in Tombstone, Arizona for a one there, and then I was going to go to Contact in the Desert and Joshua Tree. And I talked. This is a good place if you get after again, maybe next year. Seaside, Oregon. Right on the water, has a wonderful ghost conference there.
Oh, cool.
And you would be most welcomed as a speaker there to talk about what you've kind of poked around and discovered. Yeah, it would be a lot of fun. That and definitely Virginia City.
Yeah.
I've got to go to Virginia City next year.
Yeah, that's the one I'd really like to go to next year.
And Tombstone is good too.
Okay.
And if you go to Tombstone, there's a Airbnb at the San Jose house, which was the very first rooming house in Tombstone, Arizona, back in the 1800s. And now it's 4 rooms. I think one of the Earps used to stay there. And it's right within a 3-minute walk to downtown Tombstone, which is like a road. But Tombstone's a very interesting place. It has obviously all the fancy history with the OK Corral shootout and things like that, but the history of its growing and the existence is fascinating, just in American history side of things.
Yeah.
And another good one, if you get a chance, it's a little bit further, is Gettysburg.
Ah, right. Yeah.
They have some good ghost conferences there, and some wonderfully haunted areas. And you will see things there. I guarantee you will see something there, or at least hear it.
Right.
Gettysburg it's
I've
weird.
heard. I've never been there. Yeah, it's definitely one of the places I want to go.
Yeah, lots of places. So much fun. Thanks again, Lisa Morton, author, and I really appreciate you coming by. And we've got to get together again and talk about what you came out of your ghost book with. And I'm looking forward to finding out what this new book you have coming out is all about.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to come back and
That's it, let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.